Welcome to The Explainer. You know, if you've ever looked at a bank's financials and just felt completely lost, you are not alone. So today, we're going to give you the key, a clear, professional framework to cut right through all that noise, spot the risks that everyone else misses, and maybe even find some real turnaround opportunities.
Okay, let's start with what is probably the single most important rule in bank investing. Why this quote? Well, because a bank is one of the only businesses where one single huge mistake can wipe out a whole decade of steady profits. So when you're looking at banks, your number one job isn't finding the next big thing, it's making sure you avoid the hidden time bomb.
So why is playing defense so important? Because in the world of banking, problems don't just add up, they multiply. Think about it. A tiny crack in a dam doesn't just cause a small leak. It kicks off a feedback loop where the pressure just builds and builds until the whole thing could collapse. We're going to show you exactly how that works.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll break down that unique danger. Then, we'll build out our red flag system. After that, we're going to look at a checklist for turnarounds, get real about how long recovery takes, and finally, wrap it all up into a framework you can actually use. Let's get to it.
Okay, first things first. We have to, absolutely have to, understand the core risk in banking. This isn't just about a single bad loan. It's about a really nasty feedback loop that can pick up steam with, honestly, terrifying speed.
And here it is. This is that feedback loop in action. You see how it works? It starts small, right? Asset quality just dips a bit. But that forces the bank to set aside more money for losses, which immediately crushes profits. Lower profits mean less capital gets built up. Less capital means they can't lend as much, and when a bank stops lending, the businesses it serves start to suffer, which, you guessed it, makes even more of their loans go bad. And just like that, the cycle starts all over again, only faster this time. So the big question is, how do we see this storm coming before it's all over the news? We need an early warning system. And the good news is, the pros have figured out the key red flags that tend to pop up 2 to 4 quarters before a crisis really hits the fan. These right here are the 6 areas you've got to watch. Think of them like fault lines in the earth. Trouble almost always starts in one of these places. Maybe it's a sudden explosion in risky loans, or maybe it's a few key executives quietly heading for the door. What we're going to do is turn this simple list into a really powerful, systematic scoring tool. But here's the thing, not all risks are created equal. When the pros build a risk model, they know that the health of the loan book is, by a huge margin, the most important factor. So why is asset quality a massive 40% of this score? Because it's the trigger. Bad loans are what kickstart that whole negative spiral we just talked about. Things like weak profits or low capital, those are often just the symptoms. Poor asset quality is the disease itself. Okay, think of this chart as your professional X-ray machine. For each of these categories, you're not just looking at a single number. You are analyzing the trends. Are non-performing loans creeping up? Is management being cagey? By scoring each of these, you stop relying on a vague gut feeling and start making a hard, data-driven risk assessment. Now, this is where the system really shows its value. If you see a score dip below 2.5, that is not a wait-and-see moment. That is a fire alarm going off. The data here is crystal clear. A score this low signals a very high probability that major, headline-grabbing problems are going to surface within the next 12 to 18 months. It's your chance to act before the real panic begins. All right, so for every crisis, there's usually an opportunity, right? But spotting a disaster coming is one thing. Knowing when it's safe to bet on a recovery is something else entirely. This is where so many people get burned by wishful thinking. To win here, you have to trade that emotion for a cold, hard checklist. A real turnaround isn't just a good story. It needs these 6 things to actually be in place. And notice what's number 1? A change in leadership. A genuine recovery almost always starts with a new team, a team with a proven track record in fixing broken banks. And second, that new team needs fuel, a real, major injection of capital to soak up all the old losses and restart the engine. It's only then that they can get to the hard work of fixing the loan book, restructuring the bank, and defending whatever market share they have left.
Each step has to follow the one before.
So let's say you've used that checklist and you've actually found a bank that seems to have all the right stuff for a comeback. Now comes the hardest part of all: patience. You have to be brutally honest with yourself about how long a real recovery actually takes. Just forget about a quick fix. A real banking turnaround is a 3 to 5 year marathon, and it almost always happens in these predictable stages. For the first 6 months, the only job is to stop the bleeding. That's it. Only then can the new team spend the next year or so building a new foundation. Growth? That doesn't even come into the conversation for at least 2 years. You have to anchor your expectations to this timeline.
So the next time you hear a management team promising a V-shaped recovery, be very, very skeptical. The timeline isn't driven by their PowerPoint slides. It's driven by the slow, painful work of rebuilding capital, cleaning out bad loans, and, crucially, earning back trust. You just can't rush that process. Patience isn't just a virtue here, it is your single greatest asset.
Let's look at a real-world example that ties this all together perfectly. Yes Bank. Before its crisis in 2020, it ticked every single red flag box we talked about. I mean, from crazy fast, risky lending to management turmoil. And the recovery since then? Well, it's been a textbook, multi-year execution of our turnaround checklist, starting with new leadership and a massive capital infusion.
All right, let's put it all together. How do you actually take this analysis and use it to make smarter, more disciplined decisions for your own portfolio? It's time to go from theory to a practical, actionable framework.
This is your action plan. Use it to create rules that protect you from your own emotions. Systematically, you reduce your position as a bank score gets worse. You define your exact exit point before you've even buy. And you never, ever buy into a turnaround story until it meets every single one of the criteria on your checklist.
So let's just do a quick recap. This is your mastery checklist. Use the red flag system. Score banks systematically. Analyze turnarounds with discipline. Respect that recovery timeline. Apply the investment framework, and above all else, please tattoo this on your brain. In banking, you must always, always protect your downside first.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. You have the framework now. The power is in your hands. So go take a hard look at the banks you follow, or maybe even own. Which one might be flashing some red flags that you hadn't noticed before? And which struggling name out there might just have the pieces in place for a real comeback?